'cause I've got your love. You know that I'll never leave. When I wanted you to share my life, I had no doubt in my mind. It's been you, woman, right down the line. I know how much I lean on you, only you can see. The changes that I've been through have left a mark on me. You've been as constant as a northern star, the brightest light that shines. It's been you, woman, right down the line. Just wanna say this is my way of telling you everything I could never say before. Yeah, this is my way of telling you that every day I'm loving you so much more. 'Cause you believed in me through my darkest night. Put something better inside of me. You brought me into the light. Threw away all those crazy dreams. I put them all behind. And it was you, woman, right down the line. Just wanna say this is my way of telling you everything I could never say before. Yeah, this is my way of telling you that every day I'm loving you so much more. If I should doubt myself, if I am losing ground, I won't turn to someone else. They'd only let me down. When I wanted you to share my life, I had no doubt in my mind. And it's been you, woman, right down the line.
Yeah. Oh.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us to celebrate this 163rd birthday. I've already seen so many of you jump on chat from all around the country, so that makes this intro so much easier. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Layla Pearson. Outside of being a Sonoma native and an all-around Bundschu fan, I also help tell this beautiful story and build ambassadors just like all of you around the country. And so a couple things. First, if you haven't opened your wines already, please do pour yourself a glass. I did. And then for those of you who got an OSSO in your tasting pack, if you purchase a tasting pack, we sent you a wine opener that you might not have known anything about until you received it. This is an OSSO. And this is perfect to help open the library wines. And if you struggled at all and have any questions, please throw some questions in the chat and we have someone on hand to help you solve all your OSSO mix-ups. And then, though not many of you are very new to Zoom, I think after 2020, we've all spent plenty of time in front of this screen. We have a few reminders. First, this is a webinar. Get as loud as you want, buy in, we can't hear you. Cook dinner, get together with your family, dance all you want. Again, we can't see you. And because we're Gundlach Bundschu, the thing we want everyone to do is have a lot of fun. And that's the most important part. And we have lots of surprises and we're gonna kick it off and giveaways throughout the show. And then one last thing is that we will be recording this just so that all of you can relive this 163rd birthday whenever you like. I'd like to intro the panelists here at the top. These are the people that make it happen. First and foremost, we have Joe. This is Joe Ewer, our winemaker, and he's gonna help share his philosophy and his perspective and all the techniques he uses to make the wine so delicious. And
Hi, everybody.
The two gentlemen that I think need no introduction are fearless leader and sixth generation vintner Jeff Bundschu.
So say hi.
I was giving him an opening to say some
I'm
words.
so excited. I'm used to miming.
And next to Jeff, we have the patriarch and really the reason we're all here today, fifth generation vintner Jim Bundschu. Jim is the one that talked his father into resurrecting this winery back in the 60s, post-prohibition, and he truly is the one we have to thank for this 163rd birthday party.
So how come I don't have a bigger role? Well,
You're
wait
at
a
the
minute.
top, Jim.
Why don't
You
tell
can
me
talk for me, Jim.
How many Zoom meetings have you been in this year? I don't Zoom.
And so I'm going to toss it to Jeff because I know he wants to say hello to everyone that's joined.
Well, thank you, Layla. And hi, guys. This is, you know, what's amazing is I think we're all used to the surreal because this kind of qualifies as surreal that we're not doing this in person. But it is definitely, we have a saying in our family of making lemonade out of lemons. And this is lemonade because we get to do this for you wherever you are. And my first shout out to everyone was, and you've already been doing it, is just send little notes as to where you are. We've seen New Mexico, we've seen West Virginia, we've seen California. Keep sending those things. Texas, we love to know that, and I love the idea that we get to do this and be out in the world. Ohio, Iowa, Virginia, Omaha, Philadelphia. Look at that. Cincinnati, Montclair, Minnesota, Dallas. Alameda, Wake Forest. There's Putin. So, you know, basically what this is D-Day is the day, essentially, it's like a gun bun holiday. It's the day that we remember when our ancestors came here, you know, around the South America to get here to plant their flag in this ground that we're on, and take deed of the property. So it happened to be, you know, March 12th. It's actually technically tomorrow. And so we celebrate it every year. And normally we do it with the shindig on site here and a few little things out and about. But this year is special because you're all there and we get to do it from here. And the sorry secret is I may never leave Rhine Farm again if we can do it like this. It's pretty sweet. We have essentially I wish nothing more that we were all in one room together, because that's where we get our energy, and I know you do too. But if you could look around at each other virtually, you'd see not only people from all over the country, but you'd see a like-minded set of people that were open to all things in life, curious, sort of interest, knowledge, but mostly being together and having fun. And when we go back through our family history about winemaking and, you know, all the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into the farm here, it really is about producing the best wine possible. But the super secret is because we love nothing more than to share it with people and to hang out. And if you're on this call, you mean a lot to us wherever you are and however you've come to know us. I think that's it. Oh, so I get to go to the next phase of this thing. Disclosure here. We're gonna show you what's behind the onion, or what do you call that? Behind the peel the onion. I have a little script so I don't get lost. Although I'm not gonna. I just read it. What we did is we know, to kick this off. If you know us, you know there'd be a whole lot of entertainment, and we always have music, and so we got the idea that we couldn't really share a concert with you live, but we could do something that would be special, and it turns out it really is. We're lucky enough to have a friend from Sonoma that, while that may be the most important thing to us who are here because he's our neighbor, what's most important in the world is that he's a great musician and a great songwriter. And thank heavens, again, lemonade out of lemons. Poor guy had to cancel his tour and twiddle his thumbs for a little while. So he took us up on the ask to write a song in occasion of D-Day. So without further ado, I want to introduce Marty O'Reilly to the screen. Hi, Marty.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Marty, you're going to see Marty a couple of times tonight, but the first one is just to share the song with us, Marty. And why don't you go ahead and introduce it and take it away?
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much, everybody, for having me. I'm really honored to have this opportunity. Gundlach Bundschu has played a big part of my life. And it was such a fun project for me. When they asked me to do this, they just sent me a bunch of historical information about the winery, and I got to learn the whole story. And reading about it, it was clear to me that it was actually a really romantic story, this winery starting because two people in love wanted to be together, and this was their means to do it. And so I wrote sort of a love song and for this occasion, and I hope you enjoy it. Everything changes when you find someone that makes you wish to be more of yourself. Love that makes you move across the earth to find part of yourself. Longing as all nights do when they pine for good dreams. Couldn't this be the fruit of a good deed? A day for good deed. Good deeds. What if what we do here will bless our children and their children dear? What if on Orion Farm they remember how I loved you for 500 years? How I was longing as all nights do when they pine for good dreams. Couldn't this be the fruit of a good deed? A day for good deed. A day for good deed. All right.
Marty. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Oh, you cry. That's not fair. Man, I could spend hours talking to you. Thank you for that. And I really quickly, I know that you got married here, and that's another thing that we get to do here is kind of share the place. And when it touches people's hearts, it touches ours back. It's a circle that keeps giving. And really quickly, you told me the story, but you were all set to, like, where were you when this whole COVID thing broke out?
So I was about to start a tour of Europe, and my wife and I got on a plane and made it all the way to Barcelona. And then in the middle of the night, we got a call from her sister saying, you need to buy a flight home right now and come home right now. So, I had all these promoters being like, no, it's fine. Come, like, the shows will happen. And in the meantime, flights are becoming thousands of dollars in moments. And we sort of just barely escaped back to the States, and the whole tour didn't happen. But I'm currently planning the tour to replace that in 2022. But yeah, I did get married at Gundlach Bundschu, and it was one of the great gifts of my life and the best day of my life. And you guys really made that possible, which was why I was so excited to be able to do this for you guys today. So thank you very much.
Well, all right, Marty, we'll see you a little bit later. But thank you so much. That was
Cheers. Enjoy, everybody.
all right. Layla, that's back to you.
Marty, that was beautiful, and I feel like it kind of sums up what most of us probably on this Zoom function across the country feel about Ryan Farm and the Bundschus and the whole story. And I think you captured it beautifully. So thank you so much. I have one other note, just because I've noticed in the chats. Go ahead and set it to gallery view and you can see everybody. So if you're struggling to see the view the way you'd like, make sure you hit gallery view on Zoom. That's the last quote unquote Zoom housekeeping I will touch on. And let's get into the wines. We have a beautiful lineup of wines.
Sorry, guys.
We have 4, possibly 5 wines, depending on what you have. And for those of you who are at home without a tasting pack, I know that you are drinking some delicious wines as well. But we're going to start with our 2019 dry Gewürztraminer. We're then going to move into the 2017 Heritage Merlot. And then we're going to be tasting the 2012 and the 2014 Cabernet side by side. And we had to, based off the popularity of the amount of people who wanted to join this birthday party, is the reason we have a split vintage for Cabernet. So thank you for the warm welcome and so many of you wanting to join. And so we get to taste the 2012 and 14, and then we'll move into the 1992 Vintage Reserve. And so we're going to start with Gewürztraminer. And this is really where it all started. This is the wine that was planted back in 1858 and really starts the story of Rhine Farm. And so I'd like to ask Jeff and Jim, really the history behind Gewürztraminer and the length of stay it's had here on Rhine Farm and the importance to that.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for that picture of that. Those are the wines we're going to be tasting. And I want to talk, this is the time for you. We're going to talk about Gewürztraminer. Yeah. Then I get to talk to him right now.
You want me to look at you or do you want
No,
me to
there we
look
go.
at you?
So there we go. Point at the map. Thank you, Ashley. I know you're there somewhere. So Gewürztraminer, why is it even here?
It's so much fun to say. Gundlach Bundschu Gewürztraminer. I mean, why not? In all seriousness, it was planted as I grew up here. And when you all probably have been to the winery and you turn off of Denmark Street up to our road to the winery, the lane, walking home from school every day, the school bus dropped me off on Denmark Street. On the vineyards on the north side of the road, that's on your left side, was a big block of Gewürztraminer that had been planted in 1890. And so I tasted them halfway up the road on my way home during the September when they were all ripe. And they were beautiful. They're the most beautiful colored grape. I liked them from the 3rd grade on. Just as a grape, of course, I didn't taste the wine until I was in the 7th or 8th grade. But those grapes, because my grandmother was a prohibitionist, I never did get to taste those wines. But my father sold the grapes to Louis Martini, and he made the wines. And my father and Louis Martini were great friends. And Louis would bring over cases of Gewürztraminer and say, Toll, which was the name of my father, you have one of the best Gewürztraminers that we've ever had in the United States. It rivals anything from Alsace. And at that time, this was in 1970, we were looking to replant the vineyard, my father and I. And so the easiest way to do was to get budwood. And another wonderful part of the story is we have our budwood. We bought our budwood from Carl Wente, which is another very old California family, winemaking family that are still in business. We see each other every once in a while. And Mr. Wente had a good block of Gewürztraminer from which we went down and got the prunings from. And that's where our Gewürztraminer that we planted in 1970 is still growing today. Those vines are 1970, that's 50 years old, almost 51 years old. And I can almost remember my first shovelful of dirt coming out of it. Long-winded story, I apologize.
So, I mean, I think if we've tasted this, where I come into this equation is that about that time that you were planning that, Dad, the smart money said plant a lot of varieties so that if, the popular one becomes unpopular, you've got something that'll sell when you're not, because in those days when you were restarting the winery, we had more land and grapes to sell than we did wine that we could make and sell. So there was a bit of a strategic plan to ensure that there was always something that could keep the place afloat. And fast forward to 2000, and we, found ourselves with a whole lot of interesting varietals. and some that I see Layla smirking and Joe smirking because they would have loved if I'd have kept it. But we applied a pretty harsh standard, which was, at that point, everything that we did was pretty good, and the Gewürztraminer had already earned its chops as a great wine in of its own. But the threshold was, and for anything we grow on Rhine Farm or produce, was if the old world, i.e. the place, the origin stories where these wines were created, could still do it and do it better and cheaper, then we're going to pull it out and not even try. We know that we're great at Cabernet. We know that we're really good at Pinot, give on the site. Our Chardonnay is amazing, but we had some other things, some things like Riesling and Kleinberger, which I know you want that back. But we had some other things. Everybody on this call would love that stuff because it's unique, but it was like the threshold was pretty, it was like, look, if you could go to France and get it, then why would we try to recreate that? But Gewürztraminer made the cut, and it's been making the cut ever since. It's yummy. Joe, a couple things. I promise I'll let you get a word in. Can you go back?
You guys keep talking.
Actually, can you go back one there? Just really quick. That map, you're going to see this map. You've all seen it. We call it the ski map for obvious reasons if you've looked at ski maps before. This is the entirety of the property. Notice that arrow where it says winery, that just obviously is right there. You've all been, most of you, I think, have been to the winery and you've sat out. And most of you have all driven up the lane where those Gewürztraminer blocks are colored in. As we go through this, you're going to see the blocks where these wines come from. But effectively, that's what you're looking at. So you've all, if you've been to the winery, driven by these blocks, just like Dad walked. But I have to say something here. I thought that you told me it was like uphill both ways and it was snowy all the time. And I didn't know it was like there were grapes and it was a short walk when you were.
I mean, global warming started when I got out of grammar school. It was snow on the road here.
All right, Joe, take it away.
It's beautiful. So here is, I'll talk just a little bit about the winemaking, everyone, and then let Jim and Jeff get back to those beautiful stories. But so here, our picture on the top left is a picture of Gewürztraminer grapes at harvest. And Jim's right. It's really one of the most flavorful and how the way to put it? It's a grape that tastes so much like the wine that's in your glass right now. It's intensely aromatic, it's intensely fruity. And what's so beautiful about it is that all of that is really locked in those kind of colored skins. It's one of the more colored grapes or white grapes used for making white wine that is around these days. And what's so great about that is all of that beautiful intensity and aromatics is locked away in the skins, but what's also locked away in those skins is tannins and bitter compounds. So we really have to treat the way that we make this Gewürztraminer very gently. We employ some techniques called cryomaceration, where we actually freeze some of the grapes. And what this does is break down the skins and allows us to press very gently, but still, get the yields that we want, but also release a lot of what we call aromatic precursors, which the yeast then use to create what's in your glass right now. We also use a little bit of barrel fermentation. We do about 10%. And again, we do some lee stirring, during that process to give it kind of that creamy mouthfeel and texture, and also mask some of those bitter compounds that you'd find in Gewürztraminer naturally. Which other winemakers will use sugar to mask that. We are intentionally making a dry Gewürztraminer, so we can't use sugar to mask those bitter tannins. The actual, kind of science behind it is basically like adding sugar to your coffee. You'll notice that, the bitterness in that, black cup of coffee is masked by sugar. It's the same idea with, making Gewürztraminer and what's inherently in there. But we employ a lot of gentle winemaking techniques to kind of mitigate those tannins.
Great. A couple things I'll point out. I mean, did you learn something?
Definitely.
What was your precursor? Flavor?
Aromatic precursors.
We're gonna make a shirt that says aromatic precursors.
It's all we
Definitely,
do.
I see a merch opportunity with aromatic precursors on there.
I don't know how that came out. That usually doesn't come out in my Zoom tastings, to be honest. So that's a new one. But yes.
I like aromatic. I don't have a pen. Otherwise I do it. Well, that's exciting. I mean, I think Joe said it. This wine really does taste the most like the grapes it came from, and that basically essentially means that you shouldn't tell my cousin Toll, who counts all the berries, but if you're here during harvest and the grapes are ripe, stop and get out there and eat some, because they're damn good. All right, very good. Cryo, somebody, I just saw a question about cryo maceration. Did you say something about that already?
I did. So cryo maceration is another fancy way of just saying we freeze the grapes. And as all of you will probably remember from science class in high school, when water freezes, it expands. And grapes are primarily water, just like us. And when that water freezes, it expands and it blows up the cells, the plant cells in the berry, and helps release those aromatic precursors.
All right. So that's a redundant thing. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking of my next.
I usually put people to sleep. It's okay.
Hey, listen, the good news is I can wake them up because you have a couple things to give away. So look at this. I think we have a big slide. I don't want you to take it, but check this out. I think this is the first. There it is, the golden ticket. We should have a drum roll for this. If you know, we're not that far off of like a Jimmy Fallon show in terms of production value here. And so if we just had a little fake drum roll, we'd be right there with it. All right. So anyway, look at that big bottle. Boy, it's heavy. That's beautiful. 2019. It's a big bottle. Somehow randomly, sorry about that. Randomly, you all got some sort of opportunity to win this, and 2 of you did. And so what you get to do if I call your name and you're on here is, you know, I don't even have a funny question for you. Just say, hey, Jen Stoner, if you're on there, tell us where you are. And as a man whose last name is Bundschu, I'm not going to comment on your last name. And Nick Bruns, you got to be on there. I want to, you know, those are the winners of this good ticket giveaway. I wish we don't even have like any fanfare. Woo, you know. But anyway, somebody got lucky, at least in one sense. Go ahead, Layla.
We need some confetti to spray every time that we
Yes.
announce a winner. And those of you that won the bottle of the Magnum, which I find incredibly sexy. I love the Magnum of Gewürztraminer. I don't know if that's actually even appropriate anymore, but maybe. But we will get those bottles. What?
Our HR department is already on you.
For saying Magnum or Gewürztraminer? Oh.
We will get those Magnums of Gewürztraminer out to you. So thanks for joining in. I love the 2019 Gewürztraminer, and it's definitely probably the wine I consume the most of for obvious reasons. And it really kind of goes to what Joe and Jim and Jeff were saying about the grapes and the ability to kind of those floral aromatics shine through. So I love it. But we're also going to move on to the next wine is, I think anyone who works for a distributor on this call knows that I'm Team Merlot, and I've been tampering it down a little bit, but this Heritage Merlot is one of my favorite wines. And so I was hoping, Jeff, that you could tell all of us a little bit about our Heritage program and what those wines mean, and then really dive into this Heritage Merlot.
Great, thanks, Layla. So Heritage is you know, the way that we work is we are always trying to do things and see if we can even make things better. And so when we figure out a way we can do that and replicate that, we'll bottle it and then name it afterwards effectively. So I'm going to come clean and say that Heritage as a tier sounds like we thought about it in our panel, in our room, but we really just, what motivated it was we started tasting a couple specific blocks, one in particular of wines. And so that stood out, continued to stand out, and came, you know, just had reasons for existing. That's kind of something we always say in the blending table, like, does this wine have a reason for being? And Heritage for us is, well, start to understand Heritage, you have to understand how we approach all wines. The estate-based wines for Gundlach Bundschu are all, if they're not 100% from our estate, they're informed by what our estate can do. And those of you on this call know a lot about our wines. You know that we love structure and acidity, and we love long hang time. We love complexity without being overwhelmed. And so that's generally what we're trying to do across the board on a wide swatch with all the wines that we make. And then that's everything you get. The heritage is a step up because instead of just taking sort of almost a mixed sample from the whole property, they tend to be focused on single sites that can really reflect something special. And this Merlot, has a special place in my heart, the program that it came from. But before we get to why it matters as much, we'll just talk about Merlot in general. So Dad,
Why are we going Merlot?
I was thinking about a question for you that was like that. Like,
Oh.
why Merlot?
Why Merlot? It was because my father and I, when my father was still living, and I have to regress a little bit and say, it's hard to capture the spirit of the California wine business. And let's say 1969 was when the first inkling that people even cared about wine in the western part of the United States, enough to want to have farmers, which my father was, replant a vineyard. And we had formed a partnership, he and I knew I wanted to be a farmer and grow grapes. And so there was very little knowledge back then. It wasn't like today where you could hire consultants and they say, well, this type of rootstock with this varietal on this 3 acres, but not that 5 acres over there is what's going to make you 100-point wine. Back then, it was just basically willy-nilly what wines you liked, what wines, if you knew a couple of winemakers, like my father knew Louis Martini, that's basically the way you pursued what you were going to plant where. And again, Louis Martini said that he was the first person that gave my father a bottle of Merlot that was no label on it. But he was the first person to produce a Merlot and actually name it on the label. And Sterling, this was 1972 and 73, Sterling Winery did the same thing. My father and I sat on a couch, I can remember it right in the next room here, and decided that, well, Merlot usually is blend with Cabernet Sauvignon as a blender with Cabernet, particularly in Bordeaux. And also what Mr. Martini says is it's now potentially going to be bottled as Merlot, that on the label. So we said we had 2 outlets for the Merlot, and this is before I had restarted the winery, and we were interested in selling grapes. So we thought we would have more company, more success if we could sell either the grapes for Merlot or for Cabernet Sauvignon as a blender. Well, it took off like a rocket. When we started to make the Merlot, it was incredible. And of course, in Texas, no, don't get me wrong, Texas, they would pronounce it Merlot. I love this Merlot. What is this? Well, now we've matured.
Everyone, half our business.
I'm sorry. No, it's not like that anymore. That's why I'm not in marketing. I'm a farmer. I'm behind a plow all day long. But in any event, Merlot was incredibly successful at gaining such popularity that a lot of people began to produce Merlot, and it was not very good. They plant Merlot where it should not have been planted. They still sold it. It was a popular varietal, and the market became somewhat overwhelmed with mediocre Merlots. In the meantime, we were noted as having one of the best Merlots. Then that wonderful movie Sideways came along, and it's like someone pulled a trap door on that varietal. And we are basically just in the last 5 years, people who now are understanding wines more are realizing the value of a well-made Merlot. I mean, after all, Chateau Petrus, that's what it's made out of. That's what one of the most expensive, highly regarded wines, quality speaking, is made out of. And we have stuck with it all these years, and we're certainly happy we have, because when you taste this 14 Heritage, that's why we're doing
17, yeah.
17. I'm sorry.
So just for the record here,
I didn't mean it, Texas.
no, when Merlot did take that hit, and we had a lot of it, we still have a lot of it planted, thankfully, but I remember conversations that we had, and it's like, Dad, people aren't liking Merlot anymore. We gotta get on a different horse. I mean, this is good wine. And you said it'd come back, and I listened, and that was like 25 years ago. And with that, and luckily we hung on. And he was right, as usual, because like when you stick your nose in this glass, you get to see what happens when a wine like this is made well. It's really, it really just is, it's the right wine for us at the right spot on so many aspects of our vineyard. And what happened was when people would come into our tasting room, we would, people would say, I don't like Merlot. And then the smart people behind the bar would say, okay, well, let me just pour you this. And then at the end of the day, they would have their sort of eyes open one at a time. But what happened with this wine in particular was, and this is why the marketing department really has a hard time with me and why we've upgraded. I'm looking over here because basically we walked in and there was a blending session happening, and it was that 2010, or I think it was the 10, or it was 12, a long time ago, whatever it was. The wine just jumped out so strongly that we didn't have a program, we didn't have a way to make it, we didn't even know what we were going to call it. But it's like, we have to put this in a bottle because it's so good. And what's fun to share is essentially this vintage. So Joe, talk about your approach to Heritage Merlot, and then we can talk about this extra fun vintage that we're actually.
Well, yeah. So thank you, Jim, for championing Merlot as a varietal, as a single varietal, because I have a decent track record with it from previous producers. And I can say, wholeheartedly that this is one of the best Merlot producing sites that I've ever worked with. And it's really, especially this heritage block, I would put up against anything in Sonoma County. I've tasted Petrus. I'd put it up there with Petrus even, as one of the best Merlots I've ever had.
Taking us back out, Dad.
I was lucky enough to have Petrus a couple of times, but different story for a different time. So I will tell like my one story that probably won't ever reach any Bundschu stories, but the 2017 harvest was my first harvest as winemaker. And I wasn't even winemaker yet. And the best part about it was, the previous winemaker had moved on, and Jeff came to me and our current cellar master, and he said, basically, don't F it up and we'll talk after harvest. This is a great opportunity for you, Joe. And everything that was really all I needed. And it was fantastic. And everything was going really, really smooth. In fact, we had this particular block picked and in tank on October 1st. And then about 7 days later, the fires of 2017 hit, and shit just hit the fan everywhere. And we were, making the wine as we could and cutting fire lines and hosing down the roofs and doing everything else in the meantime. And we still made some pretty fantastic wines. And this being one of them, it's one of my favorite wines, not just from a quality standpoint, which I think it's really, really great. And there's a really great Jeff Bundschu blending story about this wine too. But just from everything that it represents for me, and especially my team, and what they did and what they sacrificed for this harvest, and honestly, what I saw the family do and show up for every day, when there was fire and brimstone kind of raining down all around us, was pretty special. And then, to boot, we made this really amazing 2017 Merlot that's in your guys' glass right now, which really showed that I didn't F it up, and I actually got promoted to winemaker. So here I am today, still haven't messed it up. So anyhow. That's all I can say about that.
So when you, all you guys have driven up the lane, most of you on this call, and you see the big, what we call boss lady, our sort of hood ornament, our life-size hood ornament. If you go around the back, there's a quote from one of my favorite sort of blue poets, I guess what you'd call him, Charles Bukowski, and he says, what matters most is how you walk through the fire. When we put that on there, I didn't think we'd ever actually have to do it. But it was, I don't think we can sing enough praises about Joe and the team and what they delivered, because while it was a perfect and growing season up until the, when this fruit came in, the environment in which this wine was made was anything but. I mean, we were borrowing and sealed generators, all power was out, there was no water. So this wine was basically hand tended to with flashlights and donkey power, effectively. Not much more than that, but it's really delicious. Joe, when you're making, I think one of the things, if we can go back, I'm sorry to run, Ashley, can you go back to the map really quick? If you're there and hearing me, when you look at this map, thank you. Sorry to do that. I knew that I'd do that. I'd bug you. I'm going to take his glass. Oh, you can't see what I'm pointing at. So what am I doing here? If you're going to look at this property, it's pretty diverse. And for those of you that aren't that familiar with the site, imagine that you're about 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet above it in a little tiny plane, and that your back is effectively, aiming toward Mount Tamalpais, kind of basically aiming toward the Golden Gate Bridge. So if you did a 180 degree, that would be what you'd be looking at. So you're actually looking northeast toward Napa. But what's more important is that flatland that you drive up on the way to the winery, over where we looked at the Gewürztraminer on the left side of that map, is pretty typical for the cool climate region that we're in. As soon as you get around the corner, which most of you probably haven't been because we don't get out there too much with visitors, it gets really steep, really overexposed, and much warmer. We'll talk a lot about that when we get to the Cabernet, but what that generally means is for every other varietal, we kind of keep it in its place. We keep the Chardonnay and the Gewürztraminer and the Pinot Noir on the coolest section of the vineyard, and we keep the Cabernet and the Zinfandel, the things that need to hang along at the warmest section. The Merlot is actually, if we highlighted all the blocks, which we didn't here, you'd see it on both sides, and because it brings something different to the table in both ways. This one happens to be a little bit on sort of the coolest section of the warmer section. It's a special site and kind of becomes the anchor. That's probably enough about Merlot. I could keep going forever. Thank you. I'm getting the virtual hook. Layla, back to you.
Yes, but I also can wax on about Merlot for hours if needed. This is definitely I feel like this sums up classic old school Sonoma Merlot as best as any wine possibly can. And Jim, I guess I could get up and go in the other room and give you a big hug, but you helped bring Merlot to the party.
I can't say a thing about that. Like, my wife is listening.
We'll bring
yes, the Pins. I saw a good question. The Pinzgauer has made it over there, but I think it was because it hasn't done since 17 because that fire bore a hole in that road that got us over there, and
Trees are always fun.
Yeah, trees. So we can get over there on ATVs, but we can't get the Pinzgauer over there now. So at least in a way that we want to. All right. So Layla, what's next?
I think we got a couple new winners.
Winner chicken dinner.
Yes,
all right.
This should be an exciting one.
Here we go. Ooh. Man, it's looking good. 2013. That was a good vintage. I'll put it back over here. We have two winners, Danelle Camacho and Gerry and Marla Gross. Shout out if you can, and if you can't, we're just going to drink it here for you, and we'll be okay with that too. Oh, look at that, Danelle. There we go. Look, she's on there. Good on you. Thank you. Tara loves you. All right. Marla, right on. Okay. Layla, what's next?
All right. Well, we're going to move from our 2017 Heritage Merlot into our library Cabernets. We have the 2012 and the 2014. We're going to taste these side by side here, and for anyone else who has them, and I believe a lot of you have one vintage of our library Cabernet, and so I hope that you join along. And really, Jeff, I'm excited for those of the people on this Zoom party that don't know, but our Cabernet is special for lots of reasons, but one of them is they're cooler climate Cabernets, and they lend well to aging. And our library wines really do a great job of showing those off. So I was hoping that you and Jim could dive a little bit into what makes our Cabernet program so special.
Thanks, Layla. Well, it's all about sight, and I think I'm going to back it up a bit and kind of pick it up where about the time Sideways came on. Not quite that late in our history, but I mean, again, we're at the table here. Why am I guess I'm the one that really lives and breathes California Cabernet, and specifically Cabernet from here. And we've hung a lot of our hat on it. And you can tell by all that purple up there that we've doubled down. We planted a lot on the base of our hillside here. We can try to tag team the beginning of the story, Dad, but when you got the winery up and going again, you know, in those early years, with your brother-in-law, my uncles, and everything was rolling, and you needed a way to sell it nationally, you engaged a partnership with a pretty prestigious firm to do that for you, didn't you?
Yes. Oh, flush that
Yeah,
out.
that's a.
Yeah, sorry, I dozed off there, Jeff. We were lucky enough here in Weinberg, California, which is a little post office out just outside of Sonoma. Most people who live in the town of Sonoma don't know where Weinberg is. That is our home post office. And at the time in 1980, 1979, we needed some marketing exposure. And I was lucky enough to run into some people, as wine does, as we were drinking wine, that were the West Coast representatives of a company called Chateau and Estates Wine Group. Most of you, that would be Greek because they are just now, they've been bought out. But at that time, they were the largest importers of Bordeaux wines into the United States from France. And a fellow named Abdullah Simon, who was the president of that firm, and myself met. He liked our Cabernets even back then and said, we'd like to do business with you. We were trying to get into the California wine industry anyway. Would you be willing? He sent us a 24-page contract, and my father was still living at the time, and I'll always remember, he looked at that contract and kind of fanned through the pages, and he just said, we're not doing business with those people. And it's kind of like Jeff now and me. Jeff knows a lot more now about business than I ever thought of, and my father and my relationship was the same way. I said, that's crazy. We're going to do this, Dad. And so I talked to Mr. Simon again, who was in New York, on Madison Avenue. He said, my dad won't let me sign this contract. And he said, I'll take care of it. And in 2 days, there was no Federal Express, but we had special mail. A contract arrived from Chateau and Estates that was 2 pages long. It said everything we wanted to say. And from then on, for the next 6 to 8 years, they would have annual meetings around the United States. And I was invited to be the only California speaker amongst all the people from Saint-Emilion, Lafitte from Pouliac, and from Margot's. And there I was. And the wines were spectacular. And we had the soil listening to these growers that were making these talks to Chateau and Estates and their customers. And I was convinced that we could produce Cabernet Sauvignon in Sonoma Valley on our land, mainly because of our soil. I saw lots of pictures of their soil, and our soil along that purple bench that you're looking at reflects a lot of what you find in Bordeaux. It's rhyolitic volcanic ash, not a lot of clay in it. The kids are probably going to say, Dad, you're talking too much. But remember, I was talking about the Gewürztraminer. That same year, I planted a 5-acre block of Cabernet Sauvignon very close to the winery, right adjacent to that lake as you sit and enjoy wine in our front patio at Gundlach Bundschu. That block is no longer there. The Gewürztraminer 70 years later is there. I pulled out that block of Cabernet after it was planted. I planted that in 1970. Within 8 years, I knew I'd made a mistake and pulled it out. There was too much clay in the soil. So that's my story.
Well, meanwhile, back on the ranch, while he was hobnobbing with the fancy people, he did bring him here. And I think, you know, why are we in this room? It's this room we're in, if you've been here and you see where that arrow is and you drive up the winery, we're in what I call Grandma's house. It's the house you see up here, the big stone house. And I was a punk ass, excuse the French, non-legal aged, like got to be a fly on the wall around this table, or not this exact, in this room around a table like this. And while they were, you know, what I now know doing, sharing vintages of the Gundlach Bundschu wines in those days with the wines they brought, Margot, Latour, some of Petrus, Ducru, like just an entire like tranche of these wines now that are so impressive and untouchable. in those days, they were still, awe-inspiring, but from a price point standpoint, they weren't quite what they are now. They weren't even close. But what was interesting was just how our wines, two things. One, our wines stood right in that universe in terms of acid and flavor and structure. And I really, not only did I listen to the hype that Dad said that these wines could be good, I tasted it and I'm like, wow, this could really be the case versus these wines. But I also was so appreciative that these guys, they're from the big city. And in those days I was kind of getting into rap and I had a lot to say about New York and I was interested in it, even though I've never really been off the ranch. And, even though they were wearing neckties, what I remember was within and I'd been around all the vintners and growers in our universe that were, love what they did from a technical standpoint, but then love to have fun. Just a few sips in, the whole table would just, no matter what they were, whatever the wine was they were drinking, no matter how good it was, it got beyond that pretty quick to what matters most when you're with people that you don't know, like each other, your shared experiences. And I was like, wow, we're going to make this wine that good. And we're going to have this much fun. And that's what that's sort of been the mantra for Gundlach Bundschu ever since. Whew! I don't think you guys had a chance to taste anything because we're talking so much.
What else is good?
There we go. So 2012, 2014. Joe, this is all you now.
I can just talk about the vintages a little bit because I think that's kind of interesting. And for those of you who have both wines, great. For those of you who don't, you can project. But 2012.
I'm sorry, Joe, one real quick, if you're going to do that. Can you go back, Ashley, one point? Sorry, Joe.
Jeff Bundschu, everybody.
Okay, if you're going to go straight to the wines, I want to look at the purple line up there of all that Cabernet. That is extremely steep. That matters a lot because it means there's no vine to vine shading. It's also west and south facing, which means while everything else is in the shade, these things are getting the hang time here to make up for the fact that it's a much cooler location. Remember, I was supposed to talk about cool climate. It's a much cooler location than everything else. And then it also is totally different soil type. Dad talked about pulling the cab from the clay loam that was closer to the winery. Well, this soil up there is all rhyolitic ash. The highest point, which I keep pointing at, is the Arrowhead Mountain, and that's a 950 feet elevation. But what's more important is how steep it is, and the fact that it's a completely different soil type. It's all Dad mentioned. It's rhyolitic ash, and it's a right place to be doing it. So not only the bottom line is those early wines were not one-offs. So go ahead, Joe. Sorry about that.
No, it's a really good point, Jeff. I mean, when we're talking about the estate viticulturally, we're really talking about two different sections where Rhine Farm, even though the entire estate we refer to as Rhine Farm, really that valley floor.
That's it right there.
In the winemaking world, we talk about this is the Rhine Farm portion of our vineyard. And then that, purple band that you just saw in the previous slide is La Paz. And La Paz is about, 10 degrees warmer on average on a given day in the growing season than our valley floor. And as Jeff alluded to, it's a completely different soil structure. It's really the southern end of the Mayacamas mountain range. And that was at one time in prehistoric times, a volcanic mountain range. So it's really has this kind of beautiful, very light rhyolitic ash soil, as Jeff alluded to again. It's almost like talcum powder. Like when you walk through it, it just kind of puffs up and there's old lava caps and the soil isn't very deep, which is really great. It's got, very low moisture retention properties. So we really have to be on it as far as our, irrigation practices go. But what it really boils down to is the vines struggle quite a bit, to ripen, to grow the grapes that they do. And what that means is very, very tiny berries on those clusters. And you can kind of see them here pretty well. This looks like block 10 East. And, Cabernet as a whole always does have tiny berries, but these are extra tiny. And what's really great about that, and as you're tasting them in these library wines, is all of that phenolic content, all those tannins really lend very well to the ageability of our wines. But then there's still that, kind of coastal influence that we get, from the San Pablo Bay and the San Francisco Bay, that back on the ski map, you can see that kind of band of fog. And that still comes in every day and that still touches these grapes. And what that also allows is for some really beautiful acid retention. So the vines aren't metabolizing quite as much as in some warmer areas. So they're retaining all that beautiful acid. That means we don't have to intervene a whole lot. And we also get to, really make our picking decisions based on flavors and phenolic content and structure and all the things that winemakers geek out about and love, and not worry so much about, where the sugars are and, oh crap, we got to pick it because there's a heat wave coming. It's really, really not like that. I used to work in Napa. I'm very familiar with that side of the hill, but over here, we're picking grapes that I would normally be used to picking, 2, 3, even a month earlier than we do here on Rhine Farm. So it's really special, from a winemaking perspective, to be able to work with these blocks.
A couple points about library wines. First of all, we do them because, of recognizing that we can. It's sort of like, why do you climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. Because these wines do age and they evolve, and they can get better, or they can evolve and be worthwhile as they get older. Just a couple notes for those of, most of you know about old wines, but first of all, these wines, even young, change a lot from the time you open them to the time that you drink them. And I think you guys probably know that as well as anybody. But with these older wines, it's really, it's a good idea once you get them to, if you can, think about standing them up before you serve them. I mean, I'm a big believer in, like, on the one hand, I'm like, drink wine however you want to drink it, whichever way, and make sure you really like the people you're sharing it with. That's the number one thing to do. But I also like that it can become alive and be different. And what'll happen with these wines is that as they stand up and they have a bit to settle, they'll mellow out, and they will start to get flavor that they otherwise might not have if you open them right after popping them. If you were popping them up. I have a story really quickly.
Okay.
This tasting with Robert Parker. Robert and I were hanging out. I was at a great tasting with him in North Carolina. I am a fan, believe it or not. I'm a big fan of the guy and what he's done for wine, even though our wines are completely different than the style that he tended to really champion. But it was a prestigious enough tasting that the estate director from Latour came to the tasting because it was going to be a retrospective on that wine. And he had a number of vintages that he was providing for people to get a showcase of this great French estate. And the deal with the organizers was that he would only bring a portion of the 61. For those of you who even geek out, 61 is one of those vintages in Bordeaux that, like, you're supposed to, lay on a train track to get. I wouldn't recommend that. But bottom line, it's a special vintage. And the deal was he'd bring the 61 from the estate, from their cellar, which they knew was kept well and the provenance was perfect. And the organizers of this very fancy tasting that I got lucky enough to be included in the back. I was sitting in the back. I wasn't up front to be included. Had to go out on what we call the gray market and buy sort of a balance of the 61 to meet the demand. And I was in the back, and they had the way they poured it was the wine from the chateau, the wine from the gray market next to each other. And I had both in front of me, and there was such a massive difference. The 61 that came from France that they had set up in time, that was right, blew me away. I'm still talking about it to this day, to all three of you and anyone else who's listening. There's a lot more of you. And then the wine that was the gray market wine was the worst wine in the tasting. And it was the same wine. It was unbelievable. So that's a little bit of an insider's tip. And I know most of you who are in our club get this direct. So it's going to be in pretty good shape. In fact, all of you are, because we don't really sell to anybody else. But great, Joe. Thanks. Layla?
Well, I think that we have a couple more winners. I'm going to just throw in a little side note, going back to Cafe.
Wait a second. Stop right there, because Paul over there he dropped a big name, Jean Trimbach, which, by the way, Paul, thank you for that. Those of you who don't know, Trimbach is a great family from Alsace. And
14 generations.
they
I
have,
was gonna say 13 or 14 there.
but while everyone else loves Trimbach for the wine they make, I hold John Trimbach I have a bone to pick because he crashed my car. That's what I remember. He worked a harvest here, and he worked a harvest here, and you gave him the car that was supposed to be mine before I was 16, and he totally crashed my car. So, so John Trimbach, you know, I've seen him since, but thank you for bringing that up. Somebody dropped some deep knowledge right there.
I like it.
Oh, we have a couple more. Look at this.
Whoever sent that in, please, if you ever see John, say hello from Nancy, my wife, and myself, because he lived with us. A wonderful, wonderful guy. Boy, at that time.
Okay, here we go. This is a 2007 reserve. This is pretty special for these golden ticket winners. That's a great wine. I'm gonna stop right there. I'm looking for the winners. There we are, right here. Sorry. Peter Davy, if you're on there, give us some love. And David Mocha, we'd love to see that. Look at that, a couple big winners. So again, look at that, he's there. All right, very good. We won't drink it then. You're there. Right on. Thanks, Layla.
All right, well, we're gonna move on to the last wine of the tasting, and not everybody has this wine, but I think that you'll enjoy more stories and a little bit more history. I know that anybody that has heard me talk about these library vintage reserve wines has heard me say that the easiest way to listen to the history, the 163 years of history about this winery, is to pour some old wine, if you're lucky enough to have it, and taste it in the glass. And I think the 92 does that. The first vintage was for the vintage reserve wine was in 1981. And we've always celebrated the quality of our Bordeaux varietals with this wine, and also highlighted and celebrated an artist with the label. And I'm hoping that Jim and Jeff, but since Jim did start this wine, can tell us a little bit about what the vintage reserve means, and specifically about this 92.
What the vintage reserve means, and anyone who has been responsible for tasting grapes as they approach their zenith of ripeness, when it's perfect to pick, which in my mind is one of the most important things a winemaker can do, because it's all on the little molecules of their tongues, the winemakers. There's a huge responsibility there. It's very difficult to tell when to harvest the grape, when it's going to make the optimum wine in my mind. I admire anyone who does it. I used to guess a lot. But while I was guessing and taking sugar samples and turning it over to the winemakers for them to make their decision, I would walk on the same block of grapes. You see the purple grapes there. I would walk and be tasting as I was gathering berries and bunches for sugar tests. And there's a demarcation of you can't see it there, but there's a large tree. And the closer to the mountains you got, where the tree was planted, and between the tree and the base of the mountains that the purple stops, the berries were just intense. I mean, I could notice it. The tannins were more structured, and down the hill, while they were still good, that upper block was just fantastic. And this happened for, let's say, 1978 on, so I had 3 or 4 vintages ago. Wait a minute, we should actually try and bottle this separately, which we did, and now the rest is history. And Joe, I hope you would talk about the tannins, because I think when we drink this 1992, a lot of the aspects of that, where our vintage reserves comes from, is based on that tannin. And you know more about that than I do. The artist labels came, Kenwood at that time had artist labels. Let's see, Lafitte has artist labels. We did not want to copy that. We didn't want to just go out and pay some artist and stick a glue, have them paint something and stick it on our bottle. We wanted to tell a story. And our first, for example, 81 through I think it was 84, were pictures of old Grecian dancers. And in fact, there it is right there. What is that? I'm just looking.
That would be
That's
past
83.
today. Those are naked people.
That was it. We wanted to show our customers that we weren't the first ones to figure out, let's have a party and do that. That was going on 2000 BC is when that drawing was what we could determine. And we had a series of labels that captured that theme. The label in the 1992 captures the westward movement of Americans from the East Coast to California. And we plagiarized Thomas Hart Benton from a picture in a museum in Kansas City. We plagiarized Diego Rivera, and no one ever came after us. And if they did, we always figured we'd just give them a bottle of wine and they'd go away. But the main emphasis is we wanted to emphasize a theme, not just an artistic label. And so most of the themes ran for 3 or 4 vintages. And we still have quite a few of them. Some of them I have a hole in and I miss them. That's just a hint for all of you out there. If you want to resell a bottle of wine to Gundlach Bundschu, it has to be the right vintage reserve label that I don't have. I'm all over it.
Charge him a lot of money.
But I'm also very tight, so a lot of wines already. So anyway, that's the story of the vintage reserve label. We're very proud of them. They've represented everything that we found interesting. As we develop them, we say, well, let's just spread the knowledge of art from to our fellow wine drinkers from Gundlach Bundschu. So it's not, I want to get away again from that artistic label, because anyone can do that. It's hard to think of themes, and then once you think of one, you go, yeah, we did the right thing. That's it.
All right, Joe. So the wines, I mean, you've been making these wines now for a while, and what are you trying to do? I know what you're trying to do.
Well, and honestly, in the same way Jim's talking about, the themes from the labels, there really is, there's a theme from this vineyard, and specifically these couple blocks that we saw on the ski map just a second ago. And it really is just that beautiful structure, that really intense structure, that, kind of grip that it's trying to hang on to live and reproduce, that, this site makes. I mean, there's wind. I mean, it's not only very exposed, but you get, the wind from the San Pablo Bay all the time. And even that has an influence on this site and what the resulting grapes are. So it's really about kind of, to me, the vintage reserve is a lot about tension. It's a lot about walking that, kind of fine line between what is, approachable and drinkable, but what is really powerful and beautiful about the site. And like what Jim was talking about, we look at the numbers when we're out, when we're monitoring ripeness and stuff like that, but we do the same thing Jim's talking about, where we go out and taste the grapes. And that's really, in the end, what determines when we make our picking decisions. But it's also having that history and being able to go back to wines like this, going all the way back to 1981, and kind of tasting the same themes throughout, and kind of being a steward of all that style and history that's kind of come before. And to me, it's really important to hold that, through even to this day. Luckily, we're able to work with the same block, so it's really, that part's pretty easy. But it's really about, making the right decisions at the right times, and, just carrying that torch, I guess. Great.
I saw a couple questions. I saw a question. I don't mean like, what would you say? How long before would you stand up a bottle before you were going to drink it if you were on it? And I'm not claiming to ever be on it, because the whim to drink a good wine sometimes mostly hits me upside the head. But the question came in as to when's the right time to stand it up before you would drink it. If you were going to open some old wines, when would you pull that out, pop it open, and sit it upright?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm sure all of us as wine lovers, when you have a favorite old bottle of wine, and answer that question, I'd say 3 days. The trouble is, you say, okay, we're going over to Bob and Julie's house tonight. Well, 3 days from now. And so you take the bottle out, and then on your way over, you have to put it in your car, and it gets all rattled around again. And it's definitely makes a difference. So it's a wonderful question. I'd say 3 days, and then invite whoever you're going to share it with to come to your house, so you don't shake it up on the way to their house, because it does make a difference. But it's difficult. That's a challenge.
He's got a friend that collects a lot of really nice wines that made a homemade contraption for his trunk. So a wine from he had too much time on his hands, but he like a spring-loaded thing that would allow the wine to get there. So
it was on springs. It actually compensated for the car's bouncing movement, and he put the bottles in his trunk. I lost some money on them betting. It's a long story anyway. If you want to do that, then the 3 days is fine and you can travel to your friend's house. I'm being somewhat facetious there, but, and that's why it's such a wise question. Yeah, there, you'll find that they taste a lot better if you can get away with 3 days, but that's very difficult to do.
Yes, FedEx or Amazon should get that straight ahead. I'm sorry that we can't comment on all those things. And there's been a lot of fun comments in that low box that I can barely see, but they look fun. All right, Layla, what's next?
Well, what a fantastic way to taste through 163 years of history. I think that the selection of wine that we picked touched on all the things, well, maybe not all, it's a lot of history, but we touched on a lot of the big things that have made Rhine Farm what it is and kept the Bundschu family bringing us these beautiful wines today. And I think that we have quite a few questions to get to, but I also want to say thank you to both Joe and then Jeff and Jim for sharing all of these stories and insight into all of this winemaking. I know that I actually heard a story I hadn't heard before on this webinar, which is really exciting for me because then I can tell it to everybody out in the world in the future.
Was that the one about the sexy hug?
No, that one.
Oh,
That one's every day, Jim. No, the Robert Parker story. That's actually pretty interesting about that tasting. It says a lot. But we do have quite a few questions, and I also I've seen all of these comments come up in the chat. And Paul Hill, I agree. 1985 Vintage Reserve is my absolute favorite library wine that I've ever been lucky enough to drink from Gundlach Bundschu. So you and I are soulmates when it comes to that 85 VR. And anyone, if you see that out there, grab it, whether it be on a shelf or here at the winery. I highly recommend it. So the questions, I'm going to pull some up, but one main question that keeps coming up is, and this is for Joe and for Jeff and Jim, but when is a library wine ready to drink? I mean, I think that all of us would be retired and relaxing if we could guess what that is. But I do think that there are attributes to a wine that help you know, or a vintage that help you know when something can be aged longer than others. So that's definitely something that everyone's eager to hear about. So I'm going to throw this to Joe, but I know that Jeff and Jim might want to jump in.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Jeff and Jim's comments on this, because I guarantee you all three of us are going to have three different answers. And that's the point to me, is that it really depends on your taste and, the wine that it is. Certain wines are going to show better at certain times. And from a winemaking perspective, it has to do as to how we build it and how we, intend the wine to be. Something like Vintage Reserve, we have every intention of that wine, being able to lay down in someone's cellar for 10, 20 years or more. So there is that intent in the initial winemaking process. But that being said, I like younger wines. It's just my palate. It's what I love. I love, drinking older wines and being surprised by something that's holding up so well and stays so fresh. But I definitely have a younger palate. So I know that for me, I generally will drink my wines younger than someone who, appreciates a lot more bottle age on their wine. So that's, I think, what my takeaway is to anyone about who has that question, is really just kind of know your palate and know what type of wines that you like and how you like to drink them, and then age them accordingly.
My call is, Joe, I don't totally agree with you.
I know. I knew it was coming.
Just as you predicted.
Yeah.
Probably age related, my age, your age. I'm much more tolerant of an older wine to see how it actually, when and how it actually goes over the hill. In other words, it's not as pleasant to drink as the last time you had. Now, it helps to own a winery. And when you have to start out.
That little detail.
You have to start out with a good wine, that wine that you like and respect, and put it away for 2 or 3 years. Buy more than 1 or 2 bottles if you're lucky to know what you like and are willing to bankroll your hobby, and start tasting it. And every 3 years, continue to taste. And as it matures, your patience, if you're older, your patience, how do I say it? The wine goes along with your age, and you're really proud that you're wise enough to have put this wine away and it's been in your cellar the whole time. So psychologically, you really like aged wines, but sometimes they backfire on you. But again, when I went back to owning a winery, is you get wines fairly reasonably priced. So you can buy a case, take a couple of flyers on cases of wine that you like and start, and you're going to drink the first bottle to be sure that you like it. Then go back 3 years from now and taste another bottle. You'll still have 10 bottles left. Evaluate that bottle, etc., as a geometry problem. And as the wine matures, taste it, let the years that you're in between tasting decrease. In other words, instead of tasting it every 3 to 5 years, taste it every 2 or 3 years. You run out of wine, or you still have 2 or 3 bottles left, and you decide, gosh, I only have 2 or 3 bottles left. I really like this wine, and it's already 20 years old. I'm holding on to these 3 bottles of wine just to see what will happen. So it's a mystery. You're absolutely right. I don't know what Jeff's answer is going to be, but it's probably somewhat dependent on your age, because you're far more tolerant when you're older than young like you.
The tortoise and a hare problem.
There you go.
You know, that's it. I think the thing I'll add to that is that it's just like people. Like if it doesn't start good, it's hard to end good. So like make sure that the wine, like it's gotta be good and taste good young. Don't think if it's bad young, it's gonna get better older. You know, so I think if you're gonna bother to give it some real estate in your cellar, make sure you liked it at any stage of its existence. And then I think Joe's on the money. I think what I love about Joe's answer, of course your answer is good too, Dad, is that he owned it. He owned, like, you know, I think that's the most important thing that we're about, is own what you like. And, you know, you're not supposed, even whatever you think you're supposed to do. If you like young wines, you like young wines. If you like older wines, you like older wines. And I know that all of us that love to brag about loving old wines, how many times have we held on to something and we pop that cork and like, oh man, we missed this bus left about 4 vintages ago. So I think you need to understand how much funk you want to put up with. And by funk, I mean, like, you know, palate coating and all that sort of good aged patina that old wines have. And if you like them, then let them roll.
That's a great question, by the way.
Yeah,
Definitely.
It is. I'm on Team Jim. If only my bank account with these young kids was on board with that. But I try my hardest. Buy a couple bottles if you can and taste at different times.
Layla's the youngest, freshest looking OG that you're ever going to see on any wine tasting. I'll tell you that right now. That's exactly right. Awesome.
So another question.
Gangster, sorry. The OG. Sorry.
So we're gonna go to another question. We've run the gamut. Jeff, you could even touch on Metallica with this group with these questions, but we had one that was sent in when you registered, and I think I would love again to hear from both Jeff and Jim your individual answers. But what's the most significant change here on Rhine Farm in the last 163 years?
Whew. Everyone's a lot younger here on that farm.
I'll say, you know, the biggest change is what's around Rhine Farm. You know, probably this place has stayed pretty consistent once you pull onto the property. You know, we planted a few flowers and painted a few buildings. We haven't built anything and we haven't really done much change. It's really what's going on. And, you know, urban, I wanted to use the acronym for it, but there's this urban ag interface that used to never be a problem. And it's still, gratefully for us, we have a lot of great neighbors, not a problem, but we have great, in fact, it's funny, I think today starts the beginning of frost season, or maybe yesterday did, and we have these, you know, our vines, when they are dormant, are not subject to freezing. But as soon as it gets warm and the little buds start to break, which has happened the last couple of days in a few blocks, all of a sudden we're on high alert and we have to protect those little babies from freezing. And so we have these giant wind machines that are basically helicopter propellers turned sideways, and they rotate to move the warmer air that's higher lower, and keep the vines warm. And when they're on, they're not quiet. I can hear them. I live, a few miles away in town, and I can hear them. We had some neighbors move up and text me at like 2 o'clock in the morning and say, "What's happening? What are you doing?" And they had never been through a harvest, and I had to just tell them, unfortunately, that's just the way it is in the springtime. So in general, it's that's the biggest change, is what's going on around us.
I can add to that in a different vein. What's changed is the wines have gotten a lot better. This is not a sales pitch. But the technology, most of which you get out of textbooks, and so many intelligent people in the wine business have done so many experiments that the wines just get better and better. And I'm sure another decade from now, the more understanding we'll have on the way roots intertwine with the soil, we'll understand more about that in this data age and this technology age. And I'll bet the wines 10 years from now, generally speaking, are better than the wines that we're making now because of increased knowledge. Ironically, the wine industry, the winemaking part of it, was first and foremost provided a lot of change here on Rhine Farm from my days when we had a basket press and we'd jump up and down and drink on the grapes and drink tequila to press the wine out when we wanted to press it, and the wines would oxidize. From there, we went to some sophisticated wine vinifying procedures, and now it's so technical. When I walked around and saw our Gewürztraminer in a container, in a freezing container, and there was solid ice, that's was probably 8 or 9. Well, Joe, you were the one who initiated it. So it wasn't very long ago, and I went, what in the heck is going on around here? Frozen grapes? So all of us as consumers, which I consider myself, since they won't let me out of my cage anymore, the wines are getting better and better simply because people get out of bed and try harder to make better wines. And we have more knowledge.
That's being very nice. I could debate that for hours, but
I love both of those answers, and so much truth around all of that. And unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time for more questions, so I'm going to cap it at those two. I am going to make a couple shout outs
free.
before I hand this over to
You
Jeff.
see the hashtag? There's a hashtag free Jim.
Free Jim. The amount of history,
but that's funny.
the amount of history and marketing
Another
ideas.
merch piece right there, free Jim.
Yeah, if you read through this chat, it's one of the more entertaining things I've done. And we've been corrected, Trimbach 16 generations from a division manager who sells Trimbach, so 16 generations.
That's 1,000, give or take 1,000 years.
We have a ton of marketing ideas that we're going to have to throw over to that team, from hashtag free Jim to a slew of phrases from Joe.
I'm all over
And then
that.
I even saw some sales happen. So as a salesperson, there's nothing that makes me happier than seeing transactions happen from the love of the wine. And so I'm pretty excited to be celebrating this 163rd birthday, even virtually. And I know that, Jeff, you're like chomping at the bit to kind of make sure that you let everyone know how special this has been.
Sure, they know we're special. They're special.
I'm telling them they're special. So, Layla, thanks. I mean, I'm going to say this one. Okay. I mean, I love the banter. This is almost as good as seeing you guys in person, but not quite, but it is fun because, instead of talking to a group, we get to sort of see the individual communication go through. We aspire to put a fingerprint on everything we do in a world that seems to be getting more homogenized, at least when it comes to wine and other products. So we're sticking to our guns because it's worked this far, and we're super appreciative when we get to share it like this. I think we all, we work hard and we have a good time together, thankfully, and God knows here at our company, we've been together a lot, virtually or in person. We haven't had a chance to see a lot of customers, but boy, when we get to do this, I think that's what puts a lot of spring in our steps. So we're very fortunate and grateful for all you all. I want to also just shout out a few people here. Are we going to go back to Marty? Is he on here already? All right. So I see a ton of things on here. I'm going to invite everybody who is going to be behind the scenes here to come like behind us. So I know that in my room, it's Sam. In Joe's room, it's Ashley. And it's Abby with you, Layla. Come on, everybody has to come in here. And if you have to wear your mask, go ahead. We gave each other COVID a long time ago, Dad and I did, so we're solid. Oh, look at you guys, all right? All right. Well, there's a whole production team that's behind this. There you are. Hi, Marty. And Ashley, I think, is probably still producing, but we're a group of people here that are, we're lucky to be together, but we love it. Like I said, we love nothing more than sharing this stuff. So, Marty, what we did was, the other thing that we do here for anyone that's still left on this call, we have this, it's his rule that I've had to suffer through 1,000 years, which is sing for your supper. And so normally what would happen is if we were in person, we would be making you, like it wouldn't be an option. You wouldn't get the next wine unless you got up here and danced with us. You wouldn't get the next piece of food. Like normally, you don't even get to taste wine until we put you through some sort of exercise one way or another. So what we asked Marty to do on the way out is give us something we can shake a tail feather to. And we're going to do that here. And we hope you join us. Marty, I know you have a new record coming out eventually here soon. That's been another part of the lemonade. I'm assuming we can find that wherever, any place you want to send us, anywhere that we're going to be. Spotify, I'm putting you on the spot here because you told me not to do this, but I'm doing it anyway because your music's so good.
Thanks, man. It'll be everywhere, Spotify, Apple Music, all that stuff, but not till later in the year, probably the fall. But all my previously released stuff is out there now.
Look for Marty O'Reilly wherever you find music. And then Marty, ready to move? Are you guys ready? And all those little things. If I don't see movement, there's no more wine for anybody. Thank you guys.
Yeah. All right, somebody just tell me to
Yes,
stop.
I am. Come on. Get up here. Come on, here, grab a glass. Yeah. All right,
When I was a little boy, a little Liza Jane,
oh, here we go.
I like to go out swimming, a little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane.
Yeah.
Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Well, you got my number and you got my name, little Liza Jane. Well, you got that body and you got that frame, little Liza Jane. Yeah, oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane.
Yeah, Marty.
Everybody.
Hey.
All right, bye-bye, you guys. We love you. Awesome. Shut that down.